But even by the time that Elias David Sassoon was making his new home, him and his friends were building up businesses in Shanghai, they were the latecomers to China. There had been Jewish communities there before, and by this point in the mid-19th century, when the Sassoon family builds up the community in Shanghai, Matteo Ricci is long dead. And I'd like to speak about Matteo Ricci when he was still alive. So let's travel back to June 24th, 1605, when Matteo Ricci, one of the first Christians, really a trailblazer, to open up the Chinese world to the Europeans in modern times, Matteo Ricci is preparing for the festival in honor of St. John the Baptist. Now, I should let you know right off the bat, Matteo Ricci is not Jewish. Matteo Ricci is a member of the Society of Jesus, known more commonly as the Jesuits, and by this point in time, none of the Jesuits are Jewish. Which you might well reckon, considering that Jesuits are more or less Christian, but what I mean to say is that they don't even descend from Jews. The Jesuits had been created only a few years prior, in 1534, by Ignatius of Loyola, and interestingly, the follower of Ignatius of Loyola, the fellow who was the next general of the Order of the Society of Jesus, was a fellow named Diogo Lainez in 1558. And Diogo Lainez was a new Christian. He was a Jew who had converted to Christianity. And he was not alone as a Jewish fellow in the Society of Jesus. There was also Giovanni Battista Eliano, who with his brother Vittorio Eliano, named, by the way, after their grandfather, Eliyahu Lavita, who was an important scholar and author, Jewish religious important scholar and author, they were Jesuits, and they were very involved in censorship of Jewish books, enforcing censorship upon Jewish books, as well as having made a contribution toward the burning of the Talmud in Italy. But nicht alle Tag is Yom Tif. Not every day can be sunshine. And in 1593, the Society of Jesus decides that no Jews and no Moors were Muslims in Spain, no Jews and no Moors could become Jesuits even after they converted to Christianity. What can you do? So, Matteo Ricci in 1605 is certainly not Jewish, but he is an extraordinary individual, a very interesting man, and his records from China tell us an extraordinary amount about that period. Obviously, what Matteo Ricci was most involved in was proselytizing the Chinese, bringing Christianity to the people of China. But he also had some side hobbies, one of which was making maps, but that's not for now. Another one of which was looking for Christians. Hundreds of years prior, some Christian groups had made it to the interior of China, and Matteo Ricci was looking for the remnants. Well, this beautiful summer morning is gonna be his day, because at his door is a man named Ai Tian. And Ai Tian is a fellow who had a little bit less oriental features than other people who he had seen in the area. And Ai Tian had passed his governmental tests and was coming to town, to Beijing, from the city of Kaifeng, more inland in China. He was coming to Beijing in order to find a better job than the one he had. But he was also coming to Beijing in order to speak with Matteo Ricci. Ai Tian tells Matteo Ricci with a big smile on his face that he read a book called Things I Heard Tell, and it said there about a barbarian come to the Middle Kingdom, somebody from the outside, with extremely un-Chinese ideas. This fellow believed in an invisible God. He also believed in this concept of a soul. He had all of these concepts that were so foreign to the Chinese, but that the Chinese vaguely remembered as being Muslim characteristics, because there were a few Muslims living in China, and this fellow, when queried as to whether he was a Muslim, said, no, he's not a Muslim. Indignantly, he said, I'm not a Muslim. I believe in these things, but I am not a Muslim. That's a completely separate faith. Well, Ai Tian says, my friend, we are co-religionists. We are the same as you. We have these same beliefs. And Matteo Ricci is flabbergasted. Here he's been looking for these Christian communities, and over here, one of them shows up at his door. Apparently, there's a Christian community in Kaifeng from ages back. So he invites Ai Tian in, they chat for a few minutes, he brings Ai Tian over to an icon of the Mother Mary holding baby Jesus with St. John the Baptist as a small boy off to the side. And Matteo Ricci gets down on his knees before the picture. Ai Tian comments that they don't have any customs of bowing down to pictures, but he figures that it can't be too bad to venerate ancestors, so he follows suit and gets down as well. And when they're finished paying obeisance to this painting, a little further on is another painting, and this is a picture of Jesus with 4 of his apostles. And once again, Matteo Ricci shows honor and respect to this picture, and Ai Tian says, wait a second. I don't understand what's going on here. Where are the other 8? And Matteo Ricci says, well, the reason why we only have 4 of the apostles here is because of whatever the case happened to have been relating to this picture. And Ai Tian doesn't quite get what Matteo Ricci is trying to say. And they talk about it back and forth for a little while until finally Ai Tian says, let me start here. Jacob had 12 sons. Why are only 4 of his sons in the picture? And Matteo Ricci says, no. These are not Jacob's sons. This is Jesus, who you think is Jacob, and these are his apostles. And Etienne says, but who's Jesus? And this was certainly an eye-opener to Matteo Ricci, because he never could have imagined a Christian group that did not know who Jesus was. He takes him back to the first picture, and he says, in this picture over here, the woman holding the baby, the boy off to the side, who do you see in this picture? He says, well, that's Rebecca, and she's holding Jacob, and Esau is off to the side. At this point, Matteo Ricci figures it out, but Etienne would not. Matteo Ricci figured out that the man that he was talking to was not, incredibly enough, a Christian, member of a small Christian community in the land of Confucius. Even more incredibly, Father Ricci is speaking to a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the land of Confucius. The earliest evidence that we have of Jews in China is from a letter written in 718, found in China, actually found at Khotan, the westernmost outpost of the Chinese Empire during the Tang Dynasty. And this letter is a rather boring letter. It's tattered. As much as we can make out, it seems to deal with some inferior sheep. Now, the first thing to know about this letter is that it was written on paper, and paper at the time was only manufactured in China. The second thing to know about this letter is that it was written in Judeo-Persian. It was written in Judeo-Persian in Hebrew characters, which is truly very interesting. You see, Yiddish is not the first Jewish dialect. Obviously, Hebrew is a Jewish language, but Yiddish is a Germanic dialect that is Jewish, that has been Jewishized, with additions from Hebrew, with additions from Aramaic,